Thanks for coming. I think there's just a couple more folks to be let into the waiting room, and I think we are good. So really appreciate everyone being here. Thanks so much for that. I want to thank Assad, Sean, Doug, everyone at Never Ending Productions for having me here, and it's really a true honor and a privilege to rejoin the Terry Vaughton Ref Academy. I have spoken at it before and really enjoyed it, and it's fantastic. So big hugs to Terry and Kim. I don't know if you are on here right now, but you both inspire me every day. And if you're not on here, then I want everyone to know just what incredible inspirations they are. And of course, thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us today on a Sunday for a day of learning and reflection. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about pregame strategies. So what I want to do here is share my screen. And what I want to talk is really more about kind of from the mentor perspective, an instructor perspective about the pregame. It's something that is sort of a go-to for us quite a bit when we are watching games or watching officials. And I'm just going to take my earpiece out for the moment, if that is okay. So we look at this quite a bit when we're observing officials and observing games, and we come across things that maybe go wrong in terms of some confusion or miscommunication quite often. And as mentors and instructors, we always come back to, what was in your pregame? And what I found is that we don't give a lot of attention into helping the officials sort of create a pregame and sort of where it fits and sort of what is, what can go into it. So I wanted to do that a little bit. I'm just going to kind of hide some of my controls here. I wanted to go into it a little bit. This is sort of geared to the officials themselves, but I think it would be helpful for as mentors and instructors to kind of go through here and talk about some of the strategies and some of the things that go in. You're more than welcome to this presentation. We can make it available afterwards if you want to use it as a reference. It's not by any means the be all and end all of it, but it's maybe a nice starting point for people if they want to add their own thing into it or expand on it or focus on something or focus on things that are not in here. So I'm going to go through it.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4.
So where does the pregame fit in? And what how I usually see this is the pregame fits in kind of in a circular place when we talk about experiential learning, which is the type of learning that comes from gaining experience. And so we always kind of start out, if we start out with the pregame as our starting point, the purpose of the pregame is really to incorporate the lessons that we've learned from previous games. And it's also used to prevent errors and mistakes going forward. So if we think of that as kind of our starting point, from there in the experiential learning cycle, we talk about going on into in-game. And if it's in the context of errors or mistakes or fixing errors or mistakes or how to handle those, when we're in game, we recognize or acknowledge those errors. If we can fix them, that's great. Otherwise, we may have to compartmentalize them. And while we're in game, the priority is to really refocus in on the game itself. From there, we have halftime, and halftime can kind of be a little bit of a mirror image to the pregame itself, where again we can take a little bit of time at halftime, recognize, acknowledge any errors, compartmentalize some things that we can't fix, but it gives us an opportunity to adjust if needed, and it gives us also an opportunity to refocus. So again, as we kind of come through the game, post game here is probably the closest connection we have to the next pregame. And we often say the game's not done until the paperwork is done, but really the game is not done until we've really had a chance to debrief ourselves, debrief the crew. And this is often where the mentors, and if you're instructors outside of the classroom and also looking at games and responding to games, responding to the officials, this is really the prime opportunity to kind of accept anything that didn't go quite how we planned, or things that happened that we didn't plan for, analyze those things, and then most importantly, incorporate them into the next plan. And then those go back into the next pregame. So as mentors and instructors, our jobs are really important in terms of digging into the pregame a little bit, not just asking, did you cover it in your pregame, really taking that next step to help the officials structure that pregame of, let's talk about how we can learn the lesson, what went wrong in the game, incorporate it into a plan, and how do we bring that into our next pregame.
There's veggie soup, there's some pot pie or little sandwiches.
Hey, Dr. Serafini, real quickly, there's a number of people who are not muted right now. If you could please do so to allow Dr. Serafini the chance to speak without distraction, appreciate it. Thank you.
There we go.
How many people are still in this one?
Yeah, I think the feedback's actually coming from Doug on Never Productions.
There's 50.
So if you ask officials about professional officials or people who've been in doing it for a long time, I think what you'll find is that almost our entire pregame is really kind of a reflection of all the things that have gone wrong in the past. And our next pregame, as it gets kind of lengthy, really hits on those places of, here's what went wrong in the past, and here's how I'm going to make sure I avoid that same mistake in the future. And when I'm a mentor or instructor, I often tell the officials, you're going to make mistakes. Just try to entertain me with new ones, right? What we want to avoid is putting our hand on the same burner over and over and over again. So as long as they can keep us entertained with new mistakes, then that's part of their journey, that's part of their growth, and that's absolutely fine. All right, so before the whistle, let's talk about kind of the purpose of the pregame. Again, let's talk about incorporating past lessons. And for the officials, the pregame will change over time based on their game experiences, if they're in this experiential learning cycle. Right, but it's really an opportunity to establish expectations. The pregame establishes expectations with the crew. This is, if you can sit in on some pre-games, this is a really nice place for you to kind of check on the leadership skills of each official, not just the referee, but each official. Sometimes you'll have more experienced assistant referees than referees, and that referee needs the opportunity to show their own leadership in there. So again, as mentors, if you can sit in on some pre-games, if you find someone more experienced or older trying to take over a pregame of a younger official, that's maybe a touch point that you can make to say, this is the referee's pregame, this is part of their growth and their learning, and let them do the pregame. If there's gaps at the end, then there's an opportunity for the more experienced officials to maybe bring up some points. But it's really important for each referee, no matter where they are in their journey, to develop the leadership skills, talk about how they want to do teamwork, talk about how can they motivate the crew, the skill sets, how they're dividing up the responsibilities, how they want the communication to happen, and for the rest of the crew to provide that support. Okay, so the expectations in general from a starting point usually surround communication, whether that's visual communication or whether that's verbal communication between the crew members. At the younger age levels, they may not have beeper flags or comm systems. I actually prefer that they don't. Quite honestly, I think those things get in the way. It's really important to establish those base skills, those base competencies in being able to communicate visually and verbally without those electronic systems on top of it. So again, if you are seeing people using these electronic devices or even beeper flags on youth games in particular, and everything's going great, maybe at halftime you can challenge them. Can they still communicate what they need to communicate without these electronic devices? Because as sure as they put them on, they will fail. And they will fail at very inopportune times at the professional level, at the international level. And if you don't have your first principles to fall back on, then those things become a crutch and people end up being kind of helpless there. So that takes practice, though. It takes practice to develop those first principles of communication. So that is important. The other set of expectations is really surrounding cooperation and teamwork. Right? What are the priorities for the ARs and the fourth official, if there is a fourth official? If not, how are they delegating the responsibilities between the referee and the senior assistant referee, the bench side assistant referee? Right. So those are kind of the three big ones. The fourth one, of course, is about bench decorum, either with or without a fourth official. And then finally, the pregame inspires professionalism, effort, and work rate. This is kind of this motivational aspect of it. Some people kind of fade off or lose concentration, or maybe start to slow down their work rate a little bit. And does the pregame address how to keep that work rate up, how to keep that effort level up, how to stay motivated? So those are sort of the 5 main points of what should be included in a pregame from an overall arching place. One thing we don't talk about too much is tailoring the pregame. And there's a few different aspects of how to tailor the pregame, right? We sort of have this checklist of things in terms of expectations, but in terms of tailoring the pregame, they may need to tailor it depending on how much time they have. They may only have, the time it takes to walk from one field to the other. And that's okay. But we have to deliberately and intentionally formulate a pregame that fits into that time. What are the things that we should include if you only have, a couple of minutes? The other piece to tailor is the game that's coming up in front of you. Is it just a regular season game? Is it part of a round robin in a tournament? Does the winner move on and the loser go home? Is it for the title, a championship? So again, the pregame has to be tailored a little bit around that. Particularly in tournament settings, often towards the ends of the tournaments, we get into places where a team not only needs to win, but maybe needs to win by a certain amount for goal differential. And that could impact the management of the game potentially. So we want to kind of tuck that in terms of what kind of game do we have in front of us today, and see if the pregame can maybe address that. If the time is really, really limited, maybe you at least just get the basic end of like, hey, this blue team needs to win by 2 goals in order to advance, otherwise they're out. And that's going to kind of help give some context to the crew of, even if they're up, if they have to win by 3 goals and they're only up by 2 near the end of the game, it will give them the context that they need to understand why players are reacting the way they are. The other piece to potentially tailor is from crew experience. So for example, in my own experience, one thing that was really, really helpful as I came up to a new level was, the game was a lot faster than I was used to. It was a new stage, a new experience, particularly with the speed. And a referee that I was running the line for was fantastic and said, hey, this is your first game, just get, as an AR, just get the offside right. Don't worry about all of the other things. And so if the crew understands each other a little bit and their experience, potentially the pregame gets tailored a little bit to account for the experience of the different folks on the crew. So in particular, a new AR, just get the offside. If you can get that done, this is a really good success. And here's what I'm going to do to help compensate. I'm going to pinch in a little bit closer to help with fouls and misconduct. I'm going to pinch in a little closer. I'm going to make sure I get everything to your left, because I know that's where you're vulnerable to miss something like a throw in if you're concentrating on offside. So building that into the pregame to give that little bit of reassurance can be really helpful. Conversely, if you have very experienced ARs and a very new referee, in that way, the referee might need a little bit more support Because for the referee, they want to focus on just call the fouls, right? We've got all the boundary lines. We're going to help you a little bit more with that. We'll get things that are closer. We're going to keep the benches in line. You focus on calling fouls and managing the players. So the pregame can be tailored a little bit like that as well, based on the crew experience. Okay, but ultimately, at the end of the day, the pregame, the purpose of it is really to outline the responsibilities of everyone on the crew. So again, if you're jumping ahead to after a game is finished and maybe things didn't, there were maybe some bumps in it, then when you're asking, what was in your pregame, see if you can get a little bit more specific in terms of dialing into what didn't go well, and then asking questions of the crew to kind of say, okay, this was a miscommunication here. Can you walk me through what was in your pregame in terms of outlining these responsibilities? This can come up quite a bit in set pieces in particular, where we have generally two people, a ref and an AR, looking at three different things, which is, the wall, fouls and misconduct, potentially offside, and the distance. And then obviously the positioning of things. So when you have multiple responsibilities, but not as many people to take them, and something doesn't go quite right, or there's a bump in the road, that's a really good time to dig in to see exactly what was in their pregame. Was there a gap there in terms of outlining the responsibilities, and then helping them formulate a plan going forward of how can we do this differently next time, so we do cover all these things and we get the communication tidied up. So when we talk about where and when is the pregame occurring, this is what I was talking about in terms of structuring the pregame around the situation at hand, right? What's important, and what I don't think we really teach the officials very much, is, for whatever time you actually do have, whether that's 30 seconds or 3 days, ensure the full attention from everyone and minimize the distractions. So even if it's walking to the next field, maybe they can stop on the way for 30 seconds or get to the field, go into a little corner. And for this next 30 seconds, we are going to talk about pregame. But it's important as part of that leadership for the referee, and this has to be taught a lot of times, to say, hey, I understand there's not a lot of time here, but one suggestion is just to get everyone on the same page as everything's running around, is taking this time out and saying, we're going to go over to this corner by ourselves for 30 seconds and have everyone's attention and not get distracted. Okay, so we have, again, these situations where we maybe only have 0 to 5 minutes, right? Maybe it's in between back-to-back games. Maybe we have up to 30 minutes now where the crew has the opportunity to meet, at the field or in the referee tent, or even potentially in a locker room. And that pregame is going to look a little bit different. Right? Maybe they have up to an hour. Maybe it's their only game of the day. Maybe it's the final. That's their only game of the day. And now we're looking at a more extended, detailed one that can maybe go up to 60 minutes. Maybe they meet at the locker room, or maybe they even meet, at the Panera Bread, Starbucks, something away from the venue, where they get together and do their pregame there, right? Maybe they share a meal over breakfast or over lunch and do the pregame that way. So we've got a lot of different kind of versions of this. In each case, the pregame needs to happen. And again, it's our job to help them tailor it to what they have at hand. Okay, and then as you get higher and higher, the pregame could be over a day or more. I mean, if you talk to anyone who goes to the World Cup as a crew, I mean, their pregame essentially is extended over months and months. It could be over a day or more. Could be several days. Now, this is maybe where you get on video calls with your crew. You take really deep dives into the tactics of the two teams and the players and player matchups and the event as a whole. So we have a lot of different scenarios, but again, what stays constant is there's a pregame, and that pregame is used to outline everyone's responsibilities. Okay, so when I listen to pre-games and have been a part of all of them, and I'm sure you can attest to the same, we hear a lot of review about standard mechanics And that always made me curious because, you know, we have a book and it has pictures in it and we have the standard mechanics down, and really the pregame, the time you have may be better spent not on standard mechanics. I've always thought of the pregame as we're going to get past the standard mechanics and talk about the things that are maybe not in that book, right? So let's get past the standard mechanics. Okay, but now what? So what are we going to talk about? I would like to just open up the chat for about a moment. And if you can, this is usually directed towards officials, but for mentors and instructors, instead of listing the top 5 things you consistently include in your pregame, maybe you can just take 1 or 2 things over the next minute or so and put in the chat kind of the top things that you hear in pregames that you've sat in on. So I'm going to, you can go ahead and go to the chat. I'm going to just open that up over here. Thanks, Brian. Nice to see you too. So go ahead in the chat there and just real quick over the next minute or so, go ahead and put in sort of one of the top things that you hear. Right, so we've got clock management, substitution injury, right? Get to the goal line, PK offenses, subs. Where's the secure area at the end of the game? That's fantastic. Like, where do we go to get the heck out of here? Right, mass confrontations. This is really, really interesting. So we've got I'm going to keep this going for a little bit. Tactical area, position on a penalty kick. Communication for cards, AR calling fouls. Who's responsible in the penalty area? Good, so we've got, this is really great. I'll just wrap it up in the next 10 seconds or so if you want to get in your last bits. Yeah, don't allow the ref to restart incorrectly. That's excellent. All right, how do you get attention? How much do you tolerate from the bench area? AR showing the skirt, is that still around? That mechanic? Good. Well, this is great. And so what I'm seeing in here is there's you know, kind of a wide variety, everything from specific things in the responsibility, a couple of things with motivation, and again, like we talked about, a lot of things surrounding communication. I think that's an interesting one, how much is tolerated from the bench area and the coaches, and that can be, you know, its own entire pregame and its own entire presentation there. But I think these are all really good things. What I want to do is if you want to take those, you're going to see a lot of those elements kind of come into these next few slides here. And my only purpose, again, is not to say this is the correct way to do it, as if there's only one way. There's a lot of correct ways to do it. What I want to do over the next slides is kind of help put these in some priority a little bit. And if you're listening to a pregame, to make sure that some of these priorities get addressed. And if they're not, maybe just raise the question afterwards of, you know, did this get addressed in the pregame? You know, if we had a situation in the game that can connect back to that, then that again helps connect the dots of, you know, here are the biggest priorities. Here's where we can dig in a little bit deeper. So I'm going to kind of go through some of those. Right. The main and first priority, even if you only have 30 seconds of a pregame and you have to figure everything else in the moment, is to get that eye contact. So I call that an always item. So eye contact has to happen first. That is going to be the very first piece of being able to communicate amongst the crew. Right, so we need to get that eye contact. So one instruction is in the pregame is make eye contact on every dead ball and before every signal, because that allows us to check in when it's a dead ball, see if there's any information we need to get, and before every signal gives potentially the referee an opportunity to get on their whistle in case they saw something different. So just giving that kind of half a second eye contact or a third of a second eye contact is enough time for the referee to be able to say, hang on, AR, I saw a deflection come in through a crowd of players. I can tell you're about to go up in one direction. I'm going to hit my whistle, bring the attention to me, maybe say there's a deflection and go the other way. So that eye contact before every signal is really helpful. It prevents cross signals that happen because maybe the AR didn't see a deflection, or maybe the referee saw something different, or maybe the AR saw something different. Okay, so that's important. But eye contact has to be followed up with information or some kind of communication. So we're not just looking kind of for the dead stare of eye contact, but we really want to take that eye contact and be able to kind of transmit some other information there, even if it's nothing more than, hey, we're all awake, we're all here, you're still facing the field. That's awesome. Hey, the next priority that I include is an always item, and it might look like a long list coming up, but these are what we call crimes against the game. So what these are is, these are situations where whatever else is going on, we need people to get involved. We need the ARs to get involved, or we need the fourth official to get involved. It's kind of an all hands on deck, and take the time we need to get it right. So these are the types of things where if we referee fantastically over 89 minutes, if this happens in the 90th minute, that's all that's going to be remembered, and it really has a high impact. So what are some of these crimes against the game type of situations? Right, this is where the referee is going to look to the team to help get it right. And we saw this in some of the chat, an incorrect restart. Absolutely, that's a crime against the game. Any kind of misapplication of the law or an incorrect restart. Again, this is not a judgment call. This is more like I'm about to give a direct free kick to the attacking team in the penalty area, right? I don't care what else is going on in there. Like, don't let that happen. That someone has to get involved, whether that's lighting their flag on fire, taking a step onto the field. But this is something where we don't worry so much about how it gets done, but that it gets corrected, right? Before we fall down that rabbit hole. Fouls inside versus outside the penalty area. If this can be prevented, any errors in this, then that's great. That's not always going to be possible, but especially for clear ones, if for some reason someone just had a little bit of a brain gap in the moment for whatever reason, if we can recognize the error and get it corrected, this is great. So kind of, if this is clearly inside the penalty area, don't let me restart, with a free kick outside the penalty area. Right? A goal and no goal decision. This is another one, particularly, a goal that's been scored that had an offense occurring during it. And I'll get into some examples in a little bit. Any kind of trigger event that impacts match control. So one example of goal, no goal decision is like if the defender who's not a goalkeeper denies a goal by handling, right? Or an attacker scores a goal by handling. The goalkeeper gets wiped out off ball and a goal is scored. Is there a second caution but no red card? Obviously, with the exception of the laws of the game updates there going into kicks from the mark. Is there violent conduct, serious foul play, or spitting that wasn't seen or gets severely underpunished? If my AR sees serious foul play and I'm only calling a foul, I want them to at least get my attention and give me some information there. Right? Is there mistaken ID for misconduct? Is there a head injury that I'm not seeing? So these are the types of things where we worry less about how they get fixed or how the communication happens, and it's more important that the intervention happens. Okay, and then there's all these things about crazy time, right? And at that point, it's like just watch, identify, prioritize, find the people who commit violent conduct, be able to identify some peacemakers, see who the third player in is, and be able to give the information. Okay, so we talked a little bit about empowering the ARs and taking their experience level into account. And again, we gave the example there if you have a new AR at a new level of game, but in all games, offside is always the first priority for the ARs. It's always their first priority. We're not going to get into it today, but there's a whole whole other mentoring or instruction opportunity to talk about, I don't have comm systems. How do we get information for the referee, from the referee, for offside decisions, like for last touch or deliberate play, right? But that's something that can be addressed. The second priority for the ARs is boundary lines. And the third priority is for fouls and misconduct, right? So before assisting with fouls and misconduct, make sure there's no offside or boundary line decision, have an awareness of where the referee is, an awareness of the referee's area of focus and their angle of view, and making sure that the foul or misconduct level is consistent with what the referee has been calling, right? Also awareness of the tactical situation. Okay. ARs are great at doing wait and see for offside, but for some reason, they struggle sometimes to apply the wait and see principle before calling a foul. And so when we're mentoring and instructing, take that wait and see principle they use for offside and apply it also to law of 12. Before they raise the flag for a foul, do a little wait and see if advantage. Okay, but ultimately we're going to review when, where, and how to get involved. That's kind of coming next. I'm going to go through these next little bits a little bit more quickly. I'm just going to clear that out. So boundary lines. This is an always item. If you have 30 seconds, this is the first thing that's going to help keep the communication clear. So in the AR's L, their touch line, their goal line, the AR signals first, and then the referee follows. Right? If the AR is not sure, they can do a silent signal or stand at attention, and then the referee makes a decision and the AR follows. This helps get rid of a lot of cross signals. If we can take 10 seconds in the pregame to go over this, it clears up a ton of cross signals. Okay, and then going to the other side, the referee's L, the referee's touch line and goal line, referee signals first, then the AR follows, right? If the referee is not sure, they can check with the AR. And if the AR is still not sure, that's where you'll probably see that awkward moment. Then the referee makes the decision and the AR follows. Okay, again, a silent signal to say, I'm not sure, but this is my guess. That's absolutely okay. And the AR can use a flag if it's credible. Okay, so when to get involved. This is another always item. When to get involved. When the proximity is better on counterattacks or plays near the touch line. This is when the ARs can get involved, or the AR's angle of view is better. This happens on counterattacks where the referee's directly behind play. The AR has a front or a side view, right? Including the top of the penalty area, if that's the position that they're in, if they're in a credible position to help with the location inside versus outside. And if the referee can only see the backs of players, that's also a place where the ARs can help, right? And then we put this priority in there. Fouls coming out can be done a little bit more casually, if you will, or more easily than fouls going in. Then we need to take a moment, make sure it's worth it. And then if you're calling a PK, you need to have that additional certainty. So I want to play a little video here of an example.
Toca hacia adelante para Marco
This is a good
Fabián.
place for the
Va a
AR to get
subir
involved,
Bedoya
right?
por la
That
derecha.
is,
Rebota mano.
handball. I'm not sure if you were able to see it, but the referee has good proximity. You can kind of see the referee coming into the frame here. But right here, the back of the player is to the referee, right? Who you can see right here. The AR has a side view. They're in a credible position. They're going to be with the second to last opponent. So they're about here, but they've probably got a good view over here. It's clear. It's clearly inside. This is a good place for the AR to get involved. And oftentimes any offenses that occur, these handling offenses in particular, that occur between the player and the goal line are the ones that the referee is going to be vulnerable and we need help from the AR. Okay, so that's sort of an example there. So if we want to dig a little bit deeper, we can talk about the normal patrol area, right, for fouls and misconduct, where it's just inside the goalpost to just past the halfway line, right? If it's at the top of the penalty area and the AR is in a credible position, that means they're not down at the goal line, they're not down by the goal area, they're not several yards inside. They need to be in a credible position at the top of the penalty area. That's when we expect involvement from them for location, right? So they have to be in line. The ARs can extend their involvement farther if the AR is sort of the closest cop and the call's critical, or it could result in an unfair advantage, or the situation is a violent one. Then they can kind of extend their involvement across the field. Right? We want to be aware of the red zone in here. This is really kind of the referee's area, other than the top of the penalty area for location. And I think just the questions are, does the referee need help? Does the game need help? So as you're watching games and you see AR involvement, if they're getting involved in these kind of red zone areas, ask these questions. Did the referee need help? Did the game need help? Right? This is really dramatic for the ARs to get involved in this section, so it has to be correct. Okay. Just moving pretty quickly along here, but for the fourth official, if there is one, then the expectations need to be set for the fourth. If not, then the responsibilities are still there and they just have to be delegated and shared in a different way. So the fourth official, just as a general thing, is a manager of everything off the field and an extra set of eyes on the field. If you have 30 seconds for your pregame, that's what you tell your fourth. Right? If you have a little more time, you talk about when you need a trainer and an ambulance, and then talk really briefly about how do you get my attention during the game if you need it. Right? Stepping up to the touch line, for example. If you have to take kind of a one step on the field, if I'm being a little bit thick. Right? When I'm going to give information for stoppage time, when it gets showed. Then there's all these administrative duties, right? All of these housekeeping. You can actually take a mentoring session and talk just about administrative duties, even helping the officials form a checklist, right, of all the administrative duties that come up. This is its own checklist. This is a really, really nice little session for instructors and for mentors to actually help build this checklist and make sure it gets used. Okay, so we've got eyes on the field whenever possible, but we also want the force to be proactive for incidents near the benches. So those might be injuries, confrontations, hard challenges, looking at player actions after the whistle. And then I think I saw this in the chat as well. What are the expectations of bench decorum? Right? Introduce yourself, give equal time to both benches, polite and professional behavior. It's okay to be firm. It's okay to be friendly. One person at a time to give tactical instructions. How do you use your personality to manage and keep them off the bench side AR, right? And again, if you only have brief time for a pregame, then you can go through a really shortened version of bench decorum and just talk about a stoplight of behavior. What's always okay? What should get your attention? You need to maybe move over there, have a little wee chat, and what's never okay? Give a couple quick examples, and off you go. Okay, if there's no beeper flags or comms, I think I want to really drive this point home is that it's not an excuse to not communicate or get the referee's attention. Right? There's no reason we've all officiated for 200 years without comms or beeper flags. Okay, we don't take the excuse that people are helpless if they break down or don't have them. Okay, so focus, motivation, dedication, not excuses. So they have to talk about, though, in the pregame. How do you get your teammates' attention? Use your voice, using the person's name, make yourself more visible, take a step or two onto the field if necessary. And then all of that is done to establish eye contact. After eye contact is established, decide then what additional communication is required. Is it just flag with standard signals? Is it some non-standard signals? Do you just need to bring them over and have a face-to-face conversation? Okay, but again, in 30 seconds, actually in about 10 seconds, this can be done. Okay, there's some other items here for the refs of when they only want to beep a no flag or when they want to beep with a flag. Right, and generally the difference is a beep with no flag means there's maybe only an opinion or advice, whereas a beep with a flag means that the AR is actually giving a decision. Right? The ARs don't raise a flag to say, I think. It's because they're making a decision. Okay, if there are comm systems, we're not going to dig into that too much. I'm going to kind of fly right through this. Again, you'll have the presentation. Right? But we have to keep talk to a minimum, be concise. And I think the most important part there is when to flag first and then speak. Right? That's when, again, the AR is making a decision versus when to speak first and then flag. Okay, that's maybe where maybe the ref saw it, or it's an unexpected decision, especially players coming from an offside position to play the ball. That's maybe a good time to speak first, then flag. Say, hey, I'm giving you an offside flag here. Okay, and then communication wise, essentially whatever those things are, they have to be unique. They have to only mean one thing. Okay, it has to hit the bullseye. And this is where we end up causing confusion a lot of times, is because what we're saying has more than one potential meaning. Okay, so what I did is just kind of did up a little chart here to sort of add these layers to the pregame, kind of treat it like a little bit of an onion. If you have only 0 to 5 minutes, here are your priorities that have to be put in, and it can be done in less than 5 minutes. If you have up to 30 minutes, you're going to include all of these things now plus a few other. If you have up to an hour, it's going to be both of these columns, and then the next bit of now we start talking about game plans, special players, matchups. Now we get into the game as a whole a little more, talking about team tactics and the history of the team matchups, where to concentrate on different areas of the field, the game flow, how to communicate adjustments in game potentially. And then if you have over an hour, it's going to be all of these things, but maybe you have 3 or 4 plans. What if the team, that on paper is the worst team, all of a sudden goes up by 2 goals? Now what's our plan to adjust to something like that, right? You can start looking at maybe video clips or analysis, start talking about TV or camera considerations, talk about the ceremonial aspects of the game or the event. So as you get more time to dig in deeper to your game, it kind of builds out from how do we just keep the communication and not screw this up in terms of our flags and communication and calls, to how are we now going to manage these players, this game, this event? And we just add more and more to it.
We need to take a break.
Hey, post game is just as important. I don't think the pregame is done until the post game from the previous game is done. So we just wanted, and this is where we come in as mentors as well. Debrief what went well, discuss what can be improved, own any mistakes, discuss the lessons behind it, and then most importantly, plan on how it's going to be different next time.
Sandra?
You have to debrief to learn. You have to incorporate it into the next pregame. You may have to adjust, clarify, or add some things, right? But keep calm, make a plan.
Sandra?
Right, so
are you able to hear me?
Of these good pre-games, the referees take the lead, but the ARs and fourth understand that they're crucial members of the team, right? It builds confidence. It gives them the tools to meet the expectations. The players, coaches, and fans become more confident in the team. There's less dissent, more control, more enjoyment. And ultimately, what we're doing with the pregame again is building a safety net for ourselves and for the members of the officiating team, right? And this is where we can help as mentors and instructors. Right, I think we are wrapping up. I appreciate your attention, and I know we went through a lot of material pretty quickly. We're again going to give you this presentation so you have it to use.